Hello there, you're listening to the Box Office Show. I'm Ryan Hill.
And I'm Dylan Johnson. Today we're going to be talking about the box office numbers from last weekend and our box office predictions for this upcoming weekend.
We will also be talking about the limited miniseries People versus OJ Simpson, American Crime Story. Play the Psycho theme song.
Ring, ring,
When,
ring.
Like when he did that to the one interviewer.
Yeah,
Did you
that's
see
a
that
crazy video. Did you watch the video of him talking about his book, If I Did It, to an interviewer?
Yes, and when
He's like,
forgets
hypothetically,
to put
hypothetically,
hypothetical, yeah, he
hypothetically,
starts
and
with
then
that.
eventually stops saying hypothetical and just starts going, I remember
Like,
having the
that
knife
part
in
I
my
don't
hand.
recall.
I
It's like,
don't
how do you not
recall.
recall your hypothetical? Like, bruh.
Bruh,
And then at
this
the end,
guy.
he pulls it back together and he's like, oh, by the way, all hypothetical.
Dude, I was running a bit
That
with
was insane.
Carlos earlier. I had seen something on Instagram where it was like, if you could bring back one celebrity who's died for 1 hour, and they are only doing a Hot Ones episode with no context, who would you bring back? And Carlos said OJ Simpson. So I was like, I can't, I did it, I can't do it, I killed her, I can't, I can't do it, yeah, I killed her, God. OJ,
That
that
would
was the
be.
first wing.
He doesn't even take a bite and he's already
Yeah.
confessed.
I did it. It was me. Oh my god. This dude has spicy. I killed her.
Dude, that would be. What's the guy's name? Sean
Sean
Evans?
Evans, yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be the best journalist in the world if he got
His
that
interviewing
interview.
style, yeah, the way he'll dig into it, he'll start grilling him on it. Yeah, that'd be a big episode for sure. OJ Simpson back from the dead, one night only, Hot Ones episode. Yeah,
At that point, if he's already dead, he's got nothing to lose. He might as well admit it. He pretty much already
it's
did.
true. That was the thing. I remember, which I thought like when he had died, I would have been more upset about it because the thing that had pissed me off for the longest time was that he never just out and out said it. He did all these like a roundabout ways of pretty much confessing.
Mhm.
But I was like, dude, if you're that old, just like go ahead and say it. Like just come out with it.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that pisses me off is, I mean, we know he did it for sure, but it's one of those things where like there's that slim 0.0001% possibility that he didn't do it. If he would just say, "Oh no, I did it," then that could be fully wiped off as a potential.
Yeah. Like, I
So
know we all know he did it, but how crazy it would be if evidence came out this far into the game that proved that he didn't do it and like found like an actual killer. How
he
bad
was
would we
still on
all
the
feel,
hunt.
dude?
He
Dude,
was
how
still on the
bad would we
hunt for the
feel?
killer, and nothing ever came of it. That's what's so funny too.
The
Is like this
entire
all
world would
happened.
feel like
Yeah,
shit
not a
if it turned
single
out somebody else
thread.
killed them.
Well, that'd be the biggest plot twist in the series of insane plot twists. They'd have to do another episode for this show, People
Mhm.
versus OJ, the bonus episode where, oh no, he was innocent.
Yeah, it's a
But
good thing he's dead because there's no way they're gonna bring Cuba Gooding back. Who's also
yeah,
a bad person.
exactly. But he, I mean, yeah, obviously, not a shred of evidence has come out since then that anyone else had done it or was part of it. So that was
Yeah, I
also
mean, he did it.
a fascinating part of it.
Yeah, we're jumping the gun quite a bit. Let's start with our box office breakdown for April 19th to the 21st. Coming in first place, Civil War, A24's sort of big budget project, still leading the pack with 11.2 million.
Abigail with 10.2 million coming in second.
Godzilla X Kong with 9.5 million. That's 500 million worldwide. You had that on your roster, Ryan. Is that good for you? Do you like that number?
I do like that number. I wish it were higher. I wanted to see this thing get to 700 million. It's not going to happen.
Nope.
Hopefully it'll cross 600 million,
That's
but
decent numbers though. On
we'll
my
see.
paper here, where I had been estimating how much each movie's going to make, I put Godzilla X Kong at 450. So you've surpassed my floor for what it was going to make.
Yeah, I felt it could definitely get 500. I want to see 600. We'll see how far it can go, but yeah, I'm glad that it at least didn't flop. It didn't fall below my expectations, so that alone is a win. So it's doing what it needs to do in my roster, for sure. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare another Guy Ritchie film, Henry Cavill starring. It made 8.9 million in its debut.
Spy X Family Code White 4.8 million.
Kung Fu Panda 4, 4.6 million.
Ghostbusters Frozen Empire 4.4 million, crossing the 100 million domestic mark. Sorry,
Indeed.
domestic mark,
I knew you were
as
going to
written
call it out.
into our
I thought you were
script.
going to just read it that way. That would have been funnier if you
It would
just hit
have,
him
but
with
I
100 million
didn't notice
domestic
it.
and then moved on.
What's funny is I didn't notice it, and then I looked at the screen and saw you smile for a second, and I was like, "Why is he smiling?" Ghostbusters making 100 domestic isn't that funny? And then I looked back at the script and noticed you'd written domestic, and that's
I
what
mean, it was
clued
a
me in.
typo.
Yeah.
It wasn't intentional, but I saw it and I'm like, oh, here it comes. And he didn't do anything with it until I guess he went back for it.
I love reading out
Yeah,
your
100
typos.
million domestic. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire doing a good job for itself. Dune Part 2 still hanging around the top 10, 2.9 million.
Beating out Dev Patel's Monkey Man with 2.8 million.
And rounding out the top 10, The First Omen, 1.7 million.
Now we get to our box office predictions for April 26th to the 28th. The big movie coming out this weekend is Zendaya and Luca Guadagnino and Josh O'Connor and Mike Face Challengers. Ryan,
Indeed.
any thoughts? Any thoughts on what Luca Guadagnino is going to make off of this one?
Uh, I do. I mean, I've seen the prediction, so
Of course.
I'm not going to comment on it. But you can give your prediction. I don't know if you've seen what the estimates are.
I have not yet. I'm going to guess. I think the Zendaya stands will come out. It's pretty Zendaya filled. I just saw it today. 20, 22 million.
All right, gotcha. So we will see how that shakes out. One of Zendaya's first big like solo starring ventures. She's been part of a lot of blockbusters, but this one is definitely, as far as the movie theater stuff goes. Obviously, Euphoria was a massive hit, and she was
Mm.
central to that. But this one will be the first test of her as a solo A-list star. So we'll see what she gets for that. But moving on to our main topic: People versus OJ Simpson, American Crime Story. Dylan,
Yes.
let's go back. Let's go way back.
Let's do it.
If you can remember.
Mm.
Do you know when you first heard about OJ Simpson and that whole trial?
I had to have been in middle school, man. It feels like one of those things that I've just always known.
Right? That's
It's
what I
one of
was thinking too.
those
I was trying to
it's one of those
pinpoint where.
pop culture influential moments that like I just always knew that it was a thing because it
Hmm.
was so impactful, it was so huge. It was in pop culture everywhere. It was referenced all the time. It was this huge thing. And I never really I guess at the time nobody really talked about why he was on trial. And I didn't really know that the murders were so grisly and whatnot. So I guess I didn't quite understand why it was such a famous thing. But having learned more about it and then watched this whole mini series and whatnot, you realize how it is literally better than television. It is literally more the twists and turns that have happened in that year of O.J. Simpson being on trial are so much more captivating and interesting than anything you thought could be possible in a
Hmm.
trial. It's crazy.
Absolutely, yeah. It's We'll talk about it, but there's a line that they threw in the show too that was like you couldn't get away with this on a like airport paperback, something like that.
Hmm.
And it's true. Like the twists and turns in this. I remember watching it for the first time because like you, it's one of those things that just the cultural osmosis of being alive, you just know about the OJ thing, about the trial, there's this massive deal. But you didn't know all the fine details unless you had lived through it.
Hmm.
Obviously, we did not. So all those crazy twists and turns, I discovered them for the first time watching this show. And yeah, as you said, people would balk at you if you tried to write this and hand it off to them because you'd be like, no, those conveniences are insane. Those plot twists are insane. There's no
Hmm.
shot anyone would believe this in real life. And this stuff happened in real life.
Yeah,
So no
it's
wonder
so
it was
bizarre.
such a media circus. It was so captivating for everyone in America to be watching. Yeah, wild stuff. So let's start jumping into it because again, I imagine for you this was your first real exposure to all the nitty gritty details of
Yeah,
the
I
O.J.
had
Simpson
known
story.
I had known like pop culture moments like if the gloves don't fit, you must quit, the Bronco chase, things like that that are like iconic and stand out. But I did not know the nitty gritty details of exactly what had happened the night of June 12th, 1994, everything building up to the trial, all of the evidence presented in the trial, everything that had to do with Mark Furman. I didn't know who Mark Furman was until I watched uh,
Hmm.
this miniseries, and now I will never forget Mark Furman.
Yeah, absolutely. The Furman tapes for sure were the biggest craziness because yeah, the glove stuff, all of that, the Bronco stuff, which is all
Mhm.
like visual based, which is why I think that, and it's easier to make
Yeah,
references to them and jokes about them, which you see pop up in just movies, shows, all of that stuff. But yeah, the Mark Furman stuff. Wow,
it's
did
wild.
not realize that was one of the crazy components to this trial. Definitely unforgettable once you learn about it. But let's talk about the show. Do you recall the first time that you had seen it?
It had to have been because it came out in 2016. Yes, am I correct?
Yeah.
It had to have been because this show was, I think, almost as big a hit as the actual trial itself. I remember this show being like a phenomenon when it came out, and
Hmm.
everybody was watching this because they wanted to relive the thrill of the trial itself, and the show did a very good job of doing that. I remember it being huge, so I had to have watched it either that year or the year after, like very quickly as it came out. I remember watching it all at once, binging it, so it couldn't have been as it was coming out in 2016. I'm gonna guess 2017 is when I watched it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I may have caught it on Netflix, like after it ended up going to that service.
Mhm.
Don't think I watched it
I
live,
believe
but
I
it
did the
was
same thing.
definitely
Yeah, I watched it on Netflix for sure.
it was close to when it had dropped. So
Yeah.
probably 2017. Yeah, would be my
When
best bet
did
for it.
when did the assassination of Gianni Versace come out?
2018, I think.
2018. Let
I
me
can
look it up
fact check
because
that.
I watched the OJ story when it was still just a one-off miniseries, no sequel even announced for Gianni Versace. Yeah, it
Hmm.
came out in 2018, so it had to be 2017.
Yeah, that fits. The glove fits. So 2017 is when we got our first exposure to it, and I may have brought it up on the show sometime before, maybe just talking with you, but there was one time where, for whatever reason, I wanted to go and just rewatch a particular episode just for a certain scene. I forget what exactly
Mhm.
it was, but some element to a scene I wanted to just rewatch. Couldn't find it on YouTube, so I wanted to go to that episode. And I did not plan on watching the rest of that episode, but I ended up staying put for that whole hour just to watch the rest of the episode because this show is riveting. It is
Oh yeah.
so well done. Again, the subject matter itself is very compelling, but the filmmaking that they do, that they put into it, keeps you glued to the screen. You totally get invested in the characters, which are all in their own ways like larger than life and crazy. But those like two sides, the prosecution, the defense, you get invested in them and then all their little strategies, the ploys that they're always hatching against the other side. Um,
Mhm.
Getting caught up in the larger grand implications of the trial. That was another thing that us not living through that or any of the 90s, any of the Rodney King stuff, obviously there are parallels in the 2010s. I think that's also why it probably struck such a chord. I think it was early 2016, so I think there was the Black Lives Matter movement had really hit its
Mhm.
stride then because it started with the Trayvon Martin stuff, which
Yes.
was 2012 ish, I think.
Yeah.
But then like 2015, 16, I think is when there were a lot of those incidents sort of back to back, like Eric Gardner and stuff like that. Philando Castile, I believe, as well during that
Mhm.
time. So it was very relevant to the times and how police brutality and all of that had continued. So that was another element to the OJ trial that I was not aware of. It wasn't like as big of a part of the pop culture jokes and references that would get made. So seeing that part too of like this was on its face just a very fascinating like murder trial, but then it was also a lot of elements of America as a whole and
Yeah.
the difficulties
Starting
with race and racism and all of that also being put on trial like that just elevated it even more and made it that much more gripping.
starting the series with the Rodney King riots as just context for what is going to happen
Hmm.
next is such a smart decision. Just to give it that pretense, because you're watching the show. If you know nothing about the OJ Simpson trial and you start with the Rodney King riots, you're immediately asking why would they include this? Why is there being reference made to something that happened 2 years before OJ Simpson supposedly killed Nicole Brown Simpson.
Hmm.
What is the purpose of this? And then you see it unfold slowly and then all at once as the defense team comes up with their strategy that race is going to be the main factor involved in this trial, or at least they're going to make it that.
Hmm. Yeah,
It becomes
a brilliant
captivating.
choice. Brilliant, brilliant choice for sure. The cast as well
Dude,
was so insanely stacked.
I'm going to
So
say
all the
this. I'm going to say
performances
this.
are phenomenal.
Sarah Paulson, career best. Courtney B.
Hmm.
Vance, career best. David
Hmm.
Schwimmer, career best. And
Hmm.
I'm bold enough to say it, John Travolta, career best.
I agree. I agree.
I think it can be
I
the
mean,
argument can be made Sterling K. Brown career best, but I think Sterling K. Brown is so good in everything that he's in that I can't pick a
that's
favorite.
true. He is amazing. I haven't seen American Fiction, so I can't speak to that.
Dude,
Also,
he's
This Is
so
Us.
good in American
I remember
Fiction.
seeing bits and pieces of that, but he is definitely the standout for that too. Yeah, he's phenomenal. And this was his, I think, big
This is
like
break, yeah.
breakout
This
stuff.
and This
This was
Is
when
Us
everyone's like,
was his
"Oh,
break,
this
yeah.
is like a generational talent. He's phenomenal,"
Mhm.
and he is, and everyone in it is fantastic.
Nathan
Um,
Lane also fantastic.
Even yeah, all the other players rounding out everything. Nathan Lane. Um, there are a few guys like the other guy that plays that had like the heart attack or stroke or whatever it was in the
Mhm.
trial, and then
Yeah.
leaves. Like I like that guy. Um, Garcetti as well. Like everyone
Mhm.
just brings it. They're so amazing. Except I think the one actor that I would have loved to see somebody else play it, not only because of recent developments with him, but Cuba Gooding Jr. I just don't think he captured the essence of like OJ, this larger than life, extremely
Yeah.
charismatic,
I think
lovable
the
person.
I think the
Because I
scene
didn't
that I
buy that
think
while watching him.
the scene I think he did best in is when they do the mock interrogation where he's trying to convince them that he should go on the stand, and they do the interrogation with the fake prosecutor, and he's like trying to charm her, and you can just see right through it about how such a bad choice it is to be so
Hmm.
charming. I liked him in that scene specifically, but other than that, I don't think he's playing OJ the way OJ actually was. He's playing like how we picture OJ in our heads, which is a choice. I
Well, yeah,
just
but
feel like
even mm, in how we picture OJ in our heads, what do you mean by that?
as this character who is just so focused on his own ego and his own like image in the media as opposed to
Mm,
this character who's on trial for murder. I feel
right.
like someone else probably could have done a better job.
Yeah, what I'm saying is the charisma that OJ had, which made him so lovable. I mean, that's part of why it was like the celebrity as well that was going into this case of somebody that was beloved. Nobody could have thought that they would do something this heinous and horrible and terrible, like the nearly decapitating his ex-wife by
Mhm.
stabbing her relentlessly with a knife.
Yeah.
Like to have that crazy contrast between a beloved public figure and then this crime that they're being accused of, I didn't get any of that like charisma or buying into the fact that he would be this widely celebrated, loved person.
Mhm.
So, because again, Courtney B. Vance is Johnny Cochran, dude.
Dude.
He could
Oh my
convince you of
fucking god,
anything.
dude.
He's so charismatic. He's
Even
so
in the
good.
scenes where it's just Johnny Cochran and nobody else is in the room, he is still charismatic. And he's not even trying to
Yes.
charm anybody. He's just
Yeah.
naturally charming as a person.
Exactly. So you needed someone like that because especially when you pair him with again all these phenomenal actors in their own right, but actors doing career bests, and
Mhm.
he's having scenes with them, and you're just like, it doesn't compare. Like I'm supposed to believe that OJ was like this beloved person that people would want to just believe. Oh no, he couldn't have done it. Um,
Mhm.
that was the one thing holding me back with his performances. I didn't buy that part of it.
Sure.
Um, but everyone else around him, phenomenal. The
Oh
casting
my
was
god, dude.
perfect. Couldn't be better for all those other characters.
It's fantastic. Absolutely.
Hmm. Uh, Getting to some of the, the big crazy moments, the Bronco chase. Again, you hear about it, and then when you get to learn the details of it, of this was like he was supposed to be arrested. They had already said like, okay, we want to arrest OJ. He is the prime suspect, and then they were going to let him drive himself over to uh, the precinct and he slips away from his own lawyers as well
Hmm.
to go in a freaking Bronco chase. Not even with his own actual Bronco. That was the thing that always had made me confused. I was like, how could he possibly like? Wouldn't have that have been in evidence? His Ford Bronco that had the
Yeah,
blood in
what a
it.
crazy thing. Yeah. AC Cowlings
But
loved him so much he bought the identical Ford Bronco. That is
exactly.
crazy.
So flying down in somebody else's Ford Bronco in the backseat, gun to his head, just insanity. And everyone, that too, like the real life stuff of people that because it was such a low speed chase, people would be able to drive out further along the highway and get up on the bridges and whatnot and have signs and everything for OJ. So whenever he passes by, he can see it. That stuff is just bonkers. It's insane.
Yeah.
And the other part that I loved all throughout the series, they have Gil Garcetti. He's just always like, this makes us seem so incompetent. We couldn't have done a
This
better job at
screams
looking
gross
stupid.
incompetence.
Yeah, he says that so often. Sarah Paulson
On my
also, Marsha
tombstone will
during,
read, "He lost OJ."
yeah, just everyone being so like exacerbated by this freaking insane scenario unfolding. But yeah, that stuff was phenomenal. The whole Dream Team stuff, because that's another like, okay, Dream Team, you hear about that,
Hmm.
but getting to see all these characters
They
get
are heavy
together,
hitters, bro. They are the best defense attorneys you could possibly get.
absolutely, and seeing all of them with their own little their egos as well, and always having those
Yeah,
battles.
dude. John Travolta as Robert Shapiro. I think he stands out as probably my favorite performance in the show. Him and Courtney B. Vance as Johnny Cochran. They are
Hmm.
incredible, especially when they're like at wits with one another, like against one another. It's just so funny.
Yeah, Shapiro being that like slippery, almost like cowardly in a way, conniving guy. So well done.
And John Travolta
So
does
what like
such a good job. He really does.
he does like that. You're 100% right of it being like his absolute peak as a performer because
Hmm.
it's amazing. And then there's moments too, and they do it with a few different characters, which is nice to see. But with, like Shapiro as well, they give him stuff later on, um, where you feel bad for him.
Hmm.
And I don't know if part of that's just like how amazing Travolta is that even despite those like absurd eyebrows, which are accurate to the real Bob
Yeah.
Shapiro, that he that you like see those shreds of humanity and you like feel bad that it's like, oh, this guy who is totally a schmuck, totally has no morals, is doing whatever he can just to like get a paycheck basically. Doesn't even care that, OJ is not innocent and yet he's continuing with this. Um, but then you see him later on, it's like, oh, the person getting left out of the lunch table. And you feel like just that little morsel of like, oh, poor guy.
It's
I
so
just think that's
funny.
great.
He's just
Like,
such an ass. He just wants to be in front of the cameras. It's so funny.
I know he's such a dick. Like later on, when he tries to backtrack, like he started the whole race card thing of like, okay, we're gonna make this about race, and then later he's like,
He wears the
no, I never killed
LAPD
OJ.
solidarity pin.
Yes, it's so funny.
Oh my
Gosh, yeah,
god.
he's such a schmuck, such a little conniving guy. But yeah, just they have those moments in there
Yeah.
where you can see the reality behind him. They do that too
Yeah.
with Cochran. We'll talk about that later on. But again, he's so charismatic; they can't help but be charmed by him. But then you're also like, dude, you're using all your brilliance to be propping up a guy that you also don't really believe is innocent, but they don't care. I mean,
Mhm.
that's not, they have their ulterior motives
Yeah.
here and wanting to use that case either for personal gain or to make a larger statement and try and affect some change in the system, which can be like, okay, I see where you're coming from, can be admirable, but to attach to a guy that clearly did this heinous crime in order to do so, man,
Yeah.
it's just, you're like, and he's so good at it too that you end up, you're like, man, you respect it, but you hate it at the same time
Hmm.
that he's able to be so effective at getting the jury to just do whatever they want in the palm of his hands.
Yeah. Before we get into like the nitty gritty of the show and the scene specifically, I just wanted to highlight there's so many this time around watching it, there were so many little moments that don't get talked about that much. Either they weren't widely reported on or it just didn't enter pop culture zeitgeist, but was included in this 10-hour miniseries that were so bizarre to me that I had to try and look them up to see if it actually happened or to like watch
Mhm.
the clip of things happening. So F. Lee Bailey saying the N word to Mark Furman, I was like, did this actually happen? Did he do this? And I looked it up
Oh, I yeah, for
and I
sure.
watched the video. And what's funny is that F. Lee Bailey says the N word less times than Nathan Lane does in the show,
No,
which
see,
is
that's what I was saying.
they
I
made Nathan Lane say it way more than F. Lee Bailey did, which
I
is
have
really funny.
later in the script, I have them I say not them making Nathan Lane hit the hard R like 80
Yeah, dude.
times. They did it and do it with the whip pans and everything
It
and
was a
like
great
smash
scene.
push-ins.
It's a
It's a
great
great
scene in the
scene because
show.
they're
But
like
poor Nathan Lane, that's rough.
and they obviously built it up too of like Darden earlier trying to be like, we can't allow the N-words happen in here. It'll
Hmm.
be too emotional.
Yeah.
It'll rile up the jury. And then you have
Mhm.
just having those camera movements
Yeah.
punctuate that very nasty word getting said there. But I'm like, dang, they really made Nathan Lane
They made him go for it. Yeah, scenes like
say
that,
it.
or scenes like the previous prosecutor having a heart attack. I was like, did he actually have a heart attack in the middle of like a hearing?
I looked that up too. I was like, no way.
It was technically like a smaller meeting, I think, but it was in the middle of the trial. Like it was in the room where the trial was happening of some kind, in some kind of
Hmm.
smaller meeting than I think was actually depicted. But it wasn't completely inaccurate, which is crazy. That this guy who's second chair in the prosecution for the trial of the century is so stressed by it, he just has a heart attack and just gives out completely. That and then the last thing that I had to try and look up was the scene where the criminologist they tear him to shreds and he comes off the stand and he shakes Christopher Darden's hand.
I looked that
And
up
then
too.
he
It's so
walks
funny the way
over
he did
and
it.
he shakes the entire dream team's hand, including OJ. I was like, how do people not talk about this more? That's insane. And I couldn't find the video of it happening.
I couldn't. Yeah, it's difficult to find a lot of that footage. I was trying to find some earlier stuff too of like the Marsha moment when she's like, I can't be here. I need to go like
Hmm.
raise my kids.
Yeah.
I tried to find that video because it is real, but I couldn't find like the extended clip of it. But that's hilarious because I looked up those same exact things of this is wild. Did that happen? Like shaking the hand
Could
because
you
and you
imagine?
know like kind of why he did it too because he shook Marsha's hand or was it
It was
Darden's
Darden.
hand?
It was Darden's
It was
hand.
one of them,
Because
so
Darden
not
was the
the other
one
one.
interviewing him.
Yeah, because Marsha was pissed, so she was like looking down, didn't look at him. So he shakes Darden's hand, and then you can tell he was like, "Oh, that's kind of awkward that I shook one person's hand. I don't want to seem like biased or whatever." But it's like, dude, you're on the prosecution's team, obviously.
Yeah.
But he goes and shakes every person's hands, and OJ, it's like, bruh,
That's
bruh,
crazy. Just don't shake anybody's hand.
yeah, like just walk out. But you
It's
could, he
so
probably did that
funny.
because he was like, "Oh, sorry for screwing up, and then let me screw up even more." Um, yeah, that's insane. Some of the other stuff too. The one officer that took the shoes,
Back
was it
home, yeah.
that he took it back
He put it in
home,
his
and they were
trunk and took
like,
it home for 6 hours. What the
"How
fuck?
much? Like, when in your career have you ever taken a piece of evidence home and not booked it immediately?" And he was like, not once." And that's like, dude,
It's just bizarre how, like, if you were given the bare minimum of evidentiary facts, you would immediately go, "Oh, OJ's guilty. I would vote guilty in a heartbeat, 100%, absolutely." But if you're given all the facts, especially how they were presented by the prosecution and the defense, I can see why somebody would vote not guilty. Like, I could see why there was reasonable doubt to believe he might not have done it,
okay, someone
considering how the defense presented their evidence and how much the police had bungled their investigation and the Mark Furman tapes, how that got included. Like, I could see why someone would vote not guilty because
right.
you have to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that they're guilty.
Only if only if though it was during this time where DNA evidence wasn't as prominent as it is now. Because again, us
Correct.
growing up, especially with all the like NCIS shows and Law and Order and all that, like DNA is like that. Like once you get that, boom, you got it. And so
But my thing was even in the scene where with the criminologist specifically, where they're like, they brought you OJ's blood while you were inspecting the Bundy scene, and he was like, yes. And then they brought up the fact that a quarter of the blood taken from OJ was missing.
mhm,
Like that's enough to for me to be like, I have to think about this more. Like there is no concrete without a doubt in my head he did it. I have to at least consider it more because that's crazy things to bring up.
for sure. I wish they would have gone even more into that of like the rebuttal because Marsha does do that when she's hanging out with Darden's friends. And
Mhm,
she's like, okay, let me explain to y'all how they couldn't have done this because there were so many of them on the scene.
mhm,
Furman didn't come until like hours in, like after the first people had already found the one glove, the
mhm.
one knit cap. There's no way that he could have come in, found a glove that none of them had seen, and
Yeah.
then gone over to OJ's residence, plant the glove there where no one else, would have already had seen that glove, um, and then also seeing like the OJ Bronco that's parked out there,
Mhm.
happen to know that he's not out of town or somewhere else that who would have a rock solid alibi for him to already start like framing OJ in that way. So just stuff like that would help highlight like, yeah, they did bring up like those points to try and bring up a shadow of a doubt or something like that. But
Mhm.
ultimately, there's just no way that
That scene,
they could have had just so quickly come together with this massive plan. And
yeah,
she does kind of bring that up too, like, okay, is it they're bungling
in
idiots
the
or
closing
they're
arguments, yeah.
masterminds?
But that
Because you
scene makes
can't
me
have
sad.
both.
The scene where she's in the bar explaining makes me sad because in 5 minutes, she explains it much more clearly and plainly and better than their entire arguments when they're in the courtroom.
I know.
And it makes me
Yeah.
so sad. Like you laid out all of the evidence in such a obvious like of course they couldn't have done this. Look at how like the argument of okay, we can present the evidence as it is and you can understand that looking at it is not as strong as the argument of let's give you the counterpoint. Let's show you the counter argument and then show you why that's not possible at all. Because that's even
Hmm.
stronger. Because the whole idea is that the dream team is there showing possible counter arguments. If you show that there are no counter arguments at all that could possibly be true, you're done. Done deal.
Right. Yeah. And even emphasizing what they do in the closing statements, but the shoe being the exact size, having blood in it, the sock in his bedroom, like stuff
Mhm.
like that. That is just like, how can you explain that other than it would have had been planted? And it's okay, walk through the steps of what they would have done, and then the fact that there is no timeline for that where it's possible. It's just crazy the overwhelming amount of evidence ultimately that they had,
Yeah.
and I would have, yeah. I mean, obviously, what's done is done, but it would have been nicer for
Nobody.
them to, like
Nobody.
in the actual trial, emphasize that stuff a lot more, and then bring up those counterpoints because they do. I mean, I was watching a bit of the clips of the closing arguments because that is easy to find, and they do bring up this whole thing of, yeah, the defense is throwing stuff at the wall, hoping anything will stick, but we've proven without a shadow of a doubt that blah blah blah. But it's like, okay, but run through each of their
Yeah.
absurd conspiracies and then show how that can't
Show
be
the counter argument.
a valuable, yeah, like a valid alternative, and then reemphasize that your sequence of events is the truth, like is the only way that logically strings together. But anyway, yeah, all that stuff too. I did like that they incorporated some of those weaker moments of the prosecution side where the defense
Mhm.
was like, you guys could have done your jobs better. And ultimately, I mean, that's the story. It's the LAPD's incompetence and racism
Yeah.
is what ultimately led to OJ, a guilty man, being able to get off
Yeah.
because he's black. Darden like brings it up in the end too of like the only man who's been able to get off of a crime because he's black.
That's a hard
Insane.
line. That goes hard.
It does, yeah. That was a great conversation too at the end there.
Yeah.
But let's backtrack to earlier in the series here, which talking about race, when Johnny Cochran gets added onto the defense, and then later they're trying to find someone to put onto the prosecution to one soften up like the Marsha thing.
To replace
That was
Hodgman.
fascinating. And then you had to replace him. But yeah, since she isn't as well loved by people in those focus groups as Cochrane was, so they're like, okay, we need someone to balance
Yeah,
out
but they're like,
Marsha.
she's kind of a bitch.
Yeah, and
It's
then
so funny.
dude, and having the Garcetti trying to be like, we can find some ways we can get you like a media specialist,
Specialist.
and then he just trails off as she's like glowering at him. That was great. But yeah, so they add Darden. That scene too of them. It's after Cochran becomes like the lead attorney now. They walk into the courtroom with Black Superman playing, and then they're getting to their places, and then they all start to look over and see something curious about the prosecution desk, and it's Chris Darden there.
What does OJ
No,
say? He says something funny in that scene.
he's like, when did they get a black guy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what he said. That's so funny.
Dude, and then the little like smirk, like the tiniest eyebrow raise possible, and the tiniest smirk that Marcia does as she looks over. It's like, man, everyone knew what they were doing there,
Oh yeah,
except for Darden
100%.
until later on, where he was like, "Did you add me because I'm black?" She's
It's
like,
like,
"No, we add you because you're great, and also."
and also because you're black.
But yeah, amazing stuff. Also, Lance Ito, like an Asian judge being put on there,
Mhm.
insane, insane stuff. I mean, you know, that's partially why they had to do that, but like, okay, how can we avoid seeming partial? An Asian judge to go there.
Yeah,
So wild stuff. Every little bit and piece of this trial,
dude, poor
insane.
Marsha Clark.
I know that was a phenomenal episode, the Marsha one, where
Hmm.
we get to hone in a little bit more on her and what she's going through. Because yeah, I mean, imagine you're a prosecutor. You're never expecting to become this massive
You're not supposed to be in the
nation,
limelight.
like national celebrity, and all of a sudden, all eyes across the country are on you.
Hmm.
The scrutiny of that is insane. But then obviously, her being a woman as well added things to it. Her being a single mom, so she was literally going through like custody battles during this trial. That's insane. On top of the crazy 80+ hour work weeks that
Yeah,
she has to be doing for this case, and she's not getting paid the handsome sums of money that the dream team is. I like that too, where you can see Darden's household, Marsha's household, they're like regular, humble middle class households, while you see Cochran and Shapiro, all of them living in these lavish homes. OJ's home, of course, when you see that earlier on, the Kardashian home.
hmm,
So, yeah, her having to do all of that without being so well funded, having all those personal family issues going on, having all the scrutiny in the media,
yeah, it's
the stuff with
fucked,
her changing her hair and
dude.
her, oh, it's just so
It's
crushing.
just,
She gets
she's
the
just so
hairdo.
happy to do it. She's like,
I
people are
know.
shitting on her old hairstyle. She goes, "I want to do something new," and then the guy's really excited to do it, and they go through it. What is the one? What is the one things? What does the one person say when she walks by? Who turned her
Um,
into
Rick
Rick
James.
James? Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cruel. That's so cruel. Who turned into Rick James? Oh,
And she's walking by all happy, like, oh, see you in there. And then we see in the trial, and immediately, again, just so amazing, like shots and everything. She's entering it, and it's POV, and you start to see all the cameras in the courtroom start to shift over to her and start like taking photos. Everyone on the defense team is like giving her looks, giving her double takes.
OJ
And
Simpson is
then,
giving her look.
yeah, OJ. And then you get the comment from Lance Ito being like, oh, good morning, Miss Clark. I think,
What a rude thing to
ah,
say. What an
I know.
asshole.
I was
It's so
like,
mean.
terrible. And then you see her like almost break down there and having to try and keep it together.
Dude, sometimes I
It's
think judges are just the meanest people in the world. They're A, their job is literally to judge you. And B, they have so much oversight in the court. They are literally the gods of that room
exactly,
for the entire time you're in there. You have to do everything they say or they can hold you in contempt and literally put you in prison.
which is, yeah, I
Which
ain't
is
about that.
crazy. They can
Yeah.
just do whatever they like. And I feel like it goes to a lot of their heads. Like Trial of
I'm
Chicago
sure it
7.
does because literally you're the one. Yes, that's a great example too of like, yeah, when you literally are the authority in the room.
That's like the worst example, yeah. But then like the smaller example is just being rude like that and just saying shitty things and them not being. Oh, I guess she does. Doesn't she stand up and say, "I don't appreciate the comment"?
No, not in that one. I don't
In a
think.
different thing, she says it's about something else.
Yeah, I
She says
think
about
it's
Johnny
later in
Cochran
season.
saying it about her kids when they come back from that. I know that.
Yes, she does stand up and she's like, yeah, I don't think it's like appropriate for that to be brought into the court. And she was absolutely right about that. So yeah, you feel so much sympathy for her throughout this whole episode. It's beautifully done, since she is somewhat like the protagonist from the outset, but it is a massive ensemble piece. But this is the one where we hone in the most on like someone being a main
Mhm.
character, and we see how this is all affecting her, and it's
Dude,
wonderfully
she's
done.
at the grocery store and all the magazines have pictures of her
That
and her
was a
hair.
crazy out of pocket comment. Do you remember that of
Yeah,
when she's
and
buying like
she's buying
tampons or
tampons,
something?
and she goes, "The defense is in trouble this week, huh?" Who the fuck says that? That
That
is
was
horrible.
crazy. I I
I
cannot
hope it's
believe
a true
that.
story because how wild.
I know. If that was, I mean, again, props to whoever like came up with that. If it was in the writer room or the person that did that, because if you were trying to find a way to make like the most just insulting, demeaning, like, "What are you doing, dude?"
It
type
gets
of
you on
comment,
Marsha's side
that was it.
immediately.
That was it. Yeah. So a wonderful job. Um, to whoever wrote that if it was on the writing team, and then a screw you to the whatever grocery clerk did that if they were the
If it
ones that
was
came up
real.
with it and they like interviewed Marcia to get that story because yeah, just awful, like another thing on top of her shoulders that she has to deal with. But then even the nudes getting leaked, like bruh, in the 90s she gets her nudes leaked from some
Nobody's
magazine.
nudes got
That's
leaked in the
crazy.
90s, bro.
Like that
Almost
is
nobody.
awful. So the nude beach, and then so we also hear a bit. I looked up some stuff about this with Marsha of like her first husband. We get a glimpse of that. They don't go too deep into it, but yeah, you just get that sense of like she's lived so much of her life, and it's so tragic, and yet she's able to push through and get to this place where she's trying to bring justice.
Because Marsha
That comes
Clark
up
is
in the final.
strong and awesome.
Exactly. That comes up in the final episode of like why she pushes so hard and why she was a
Mm.
prosecutor in the first place of what had happened to her. So it's just, yeah, truly the strength that she had to go through all of this is insane to imagine. So props to her for the real life Marshall Clark. And then props to Sarah Paulson for bringing her to life in this miniseries. Because, yeah, a phenomenal character that you truly are rooting for. You feel pain alongside of when she's just getting all these horrible comments and actions, all this stuff directed towards her. And then it also is a springboard for the Darden and Marcia relationship, which is so nice, so sweet. You
Yeah.
start rooting for that of them like maybe getting together. But
Which
yeah,
is
that
an
whole
interesting thing to throw in there.
it is, and
The
I was
prosecution loves each other.
exactly the real life thing of that too of Marsha always playing coy about how much of that is real and whether or not there was any potential fling between the two of them. But they're so charismatic and they have really good chemistry with each other that it just made sense. So I don't know if again that was from real life where they had caught wind of them potentially being an item, but it was smart, I think, for the miniseries to have this element thrown in because it
Yeah.
gives you
Makes
more
it compelling.
of them to work with on the personal side. It makes it compelling to see, will they, or won't they? And then it also starts to seep into their work. You start to see how when they are doing really well with each other in their personal lives, they're sort of in a groove professionally. And then once that ends, like after they go up to see the friends, and then he's outside her hotel room, and she's like clearly inviting him in, and he wants to, but he doesn't do it, and then he's just left there after the door closes. Like, oh, I messed up. After that point is when all the stuff with the gloves go down,
Oof. Dude, the
and so they
gloves.
don't
The
see eye to eye.
gloves.
Yeah, they don't see eye to eye. She does not want the gloves, and she's
Yeah.
being very like short and direct with them. Of like, we are not doing the gloves, and he's like,
There
no,
is
trust me.
there's absolutely no way Robert Shapiro put those gloves on. That
That's
did
what I'm
not
saying.
happen.
I
There is
didn't look
no
that
way
one
that
up,
happened.
but I was like,
There's no
is that
fucking way that
possible?
happened.
Because I thought those gloves were like the actual ones that they had on display, and I'm like, how is Shapiro number one putting those on? But number two, I'm like, yeah, how would he think of that as a way to like suddenly get the defense to start pushing for the gloves thing to happen? And then, ooh, that comment too of Cochran being like, if you don't ask him to try on the gloves, I will.
Oh
Wow,
yeah.
just doing
What
that
a little
to
dig.
push his buttons to make him go for it. But yeah, that was the one moment where, yeah, I meant to look that up and I did not to see like how did that come to
I don't know
be?
how much of it was the defense actually. I'm going to look it up while you talk because I'm so curious about this. Because I don't. I mean, in reality, I don't imagine the defense being like, "Yeah, there's no way he's going to get those gloves." I don't imagine a reality where the defense is actually egging on Chris Darden to do it. I see more of a reality where Chris Darden wants to do it and then it happens to work out because there were a bunch of rumors that the latex gloves were preventing him from putting them on, b he wasn't actually trying that hard to fit them on, c some people said that they gave him a bunch of like sodium to make him bloat up beforehand so that it would
Mhm.
be harder for him to put it on, all kinds of reasons why those gloves wouldn't have been able to fit.
Or the arthritis medication that
Arthritis
they
medication,
told
yes.
him not to take it so that it would swell up or something like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Which I
look
don't
it
know if
up.
that's ever been confirmed. I don't think it has. I think those have just been rumors. But that would make sense if they like knew beforehand and then could like find different ways to make sure that the gloves didn't fit. Here's the other crazy part about it: those gloves, number one, absolutely fit. They did.
Yeah,
He was
they were,
definitely like
yeah.
messing around with them. But even once he like had them on, it was like, oh no, they don't fit. It's like no, they fit. Like you can see them fitting clearly. Like they wouldn't randomly slip off or they weren't impossible to get on. Like they fit well enough to where he even grasped. They're like, here, let's put a marker in his thing. He was able to fold his hand around that. It stayed put. Like they fit. The other theory is the blood, the dried blood, because their leather gloves made it shrink so that it wouldn't be the same size as when they are normal and don't have dried blood in them. So that could be the other reason why. The thing that I was wondering, I was like, oh, if you had the original plan, I think was for them to have other gloves for him to just try on. I was like, why wouldn't they just do that? Why
It
would you have
also
him put on
says
the
that,
original gloves?
yeah, it's all the things you were saying. It said that the prosecutions didn't want him to do it because the blood had made it shrink, and also the gloves had been frozen and unfrozen multiple times, making it shrink. The rubber gloves that he was wearing underneath. Darden once said at a 2012 panel discussion, apparently, that he believes Cochran tampered with the gloves, tearing the lining in them, which is an
Interesting.
interesting claim to make. I don't know how he would have gotten his hands on them. And then some people
Yeah,
say that he stopped
I
taking
don't think that
arthritis
would.
medicine 2 weeks prior and his hands swelled up.
Right. So yeah, those are all the reasons why they're like, oh, it probably didn't fit. And then of course, I mean, the main one is OJ like just being ridiculous about trying to get them on. The latex gloves, I think, definitely also were a factor.
Mm.
But I'm like, bruh, just have them try on other gloves. And apparently they did. They had them because if you look up like OJ trying on gloves, you can see there's like two different pictures. He's wearing a different tie and a different suit in them, and
Mm.
one of them has the latex gloves, the other doesn't. So they did ultimately get him to try on other gloves,
Yeah.
which again I also think
That's
fit.
just
Like
not
looking
as
at those
damning,
pictures,
though. Him trying
it's
on gloves
not
that
as
weren't the same
damning.
are not damning at all.
But that's why they should have not had them try on the original gloves. That was a big blunder. If you're gonna have them try on gloves, just find like, hey, we need gloves of the same size. Have them try them on. I don't know if there's some way. I guess they can't, but like, find some way to maybe do it where it's not in front of the jury for the first time. But you can see why Darden wanted to do that. He's like, we need a big moment, and that would definitely be a big moment. But have him do it where you can have other people put the gloves on for him, so he's not being able to like mess with it. You can not have the latex gloves on. It's not dried blood making it shrink, anything like that. So that you just have them put on the gloves for the first time that aren't the exact pair, but they're the same size. Because who would be like, what is their defense going to be? Oh no, he had a special type of gloves or something like that. Or no, these are actually special type of gloves. If you have a glove of a certain size, they're all going to fit the same way.
Yeah.
So have them try on a new, fresh, like pair of gloves, whatever it is, of that same size, same make, and then that's your
Yep.
moment instead of the original gloves. I just can't believe
They would have fit, and then you would
they
have
went with
gotten the
that.
impression of him holding, like wearing. The whole idea was that he wanted him
He
to wear
has
the
the murder
gloves in
gloves.
front of
There's
the
your thing.
jury.
Yeah,
He just wanted to wear it in front of the jury. Doing it with other people's gloves, it wouldn't have been as damning, but you also wouldn't have been risking anything.
exactly.
The reward is lower, but the risk is significantly lower.
Yeah, but then you can explain too. You can be like, by the way, here's why we're not going to have them try on the actual gloves because number one, the whole evidence thing. Again, you can put on latex gloves. But it's like I don't know. That
I think
strikes me as
ultimately,
it's
if I
still
was in the
kind of affecting the
prosecution and I was
evidence.
so confident in the evidence, in the DNA evidence and whatnot, I think I would have just left the gloves aside. I wouldn't have had him
I
try on any
also
gloves.
probably wouldn't have done it, but I can see again if I were Marsha and Darden were coming to me with that, I'd be like, well, let's get someone on the stand to say, here's why we can't do the original gloves because the blood in them has dried, it's made to
It
shrink, blah
just
blah
seems like
blah.
excuses,
Let's put on another
and then the
glove.
prosecution can come back with, "Hey, come on, like just let him try on the like." It just seems like you're making excuses for something that could have just been left out.
I mean, that's true, but I feel like that one would have been way better. And then again, you'd be like, explain how, again, it should be the same gloves, the same make, so it should matter which one he puts on. Don't have him try on actual evidence because we don't want to tamper with that after
Mm,
the fact. Have him try on this new pair of gloves of the same size, blah, blah, blah. They had later, again, they try to backtrack with showing the picture of him wearing gloves at like different games. So again, it's just
mm.
all of that after you have him try on the gloves and it seems like they don't fit that is tough to try and
Yes,
come
it's
back
hard to
from. So they
break.
should
Yeah,
have avoided it in the first place. Um, yeah, some other moments of the show that I thought were great. The jury stuff. This was another thing of like the
oh
jury
yeah.
getting stir crazy, and then them having their own like protest, basically coming into court all wearing black.
That's another thing I tried to
Insane.
look up and I couldn't find anything. I didn't see a video of it, but I saw people who wrote about it that were in the courtroom that were like, yeah, they did this. They came in
Well,
all
yeah, they
black.
can't have a video of the jury, of course, but
Yeah,
there'd be people that would like write and be like, "Oh, here's all of them coming in wearing the same
which is so
like color."
crazy.
That's crazy. But that whole episode too, the whole like the last 5 episodes are just it's all great, but those 5 episodes are just such bangers back to back. And the
Yeah.
jury thing of them all like Marsha and Johnny now trying to just do whatever they can to get
Hmm.
rid of every member of the jury that they think isn't on their side. And you have them like that montage of them being brought into Lance's office and they're like, "Is this a picture of OJ Simpson?" Yes. "Who is this standing next to OJ Simpson?" "Oh, that's me."
Do I need
"You're
to
out
see
of
anything
here."
else?
Yeah, doing anything else. All of that stuff is just so good.
It's really, really funny. And then I love that like they realize they're coming dangerously close to a mistrial, which neither of the sides want. And so
Hmm.
they realize they have to kind of let it go. And Johnny Cochran has that moment where he walks out and he just hands a coffee to uh Marsha and says like, "I heard you take it black with two Stevios or something," and then just leaves. That's the whole thing,
Hmm.
and it's like, okay, settled. They're not going to do this anymore.
Right. Which is great. But yeah, just imagine that they run out of jurors
That's
to
crazy.
put in there because they keep getting them
It is hard
disqualified.
to find an impartial jury after it's been so broadcast like that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, even the initial jury selection, because when it's something that national and that widespread, it's like, how
Hmm.
can you find anyone partial? Like,
You just have to
and
find the
this is a
least
separate
partial
thing,
people possible,
but like
but there
the
will always
Donald
be.
Trump stuff, like those trials, like, how could you ever
Are there
truly
jurors?
find someone that's there are for some, yeah, the one
How are they impartial?
for some of them there's going to be because that's what it was. Yeah, the New York one, a few jurors literally said, "Can I like be dismissed because I I don't want to be a part of something like this. I feel like it'll be too much." Because at some point the jurors' names are going to get revealed or anything.
Hmm.
But it's like, how do
Yeah,
you go in to that being completely impartial? Like, I just don't know that that's possible. But again, I mean, that's the way the system works. So you have to do the jury selection, and
yeah.
through that, you have to find people that aren't
Have you
going
ever
to be.
been summoned for jury duty?
I have not. I've said this
Me
so
neither.
many times. I want to be
I
summoned. I
kind of
want
want
to
to
do
do it
my
once. I
my.
want it to be kind of like a more important case. Like I don't want it to be something stupid. I kind of want it to be something interesting.
Well, you
I
don't want it to be one of these that
want it
you're
to be
taken
something where
out
I'm
of your life
sequestered.
for
Yeah.
8 months. Yeah, the sequester is crazy, but I would want it to be something
I want it to be something
because I don't
where
know.
I
I don't
feel
wanna
like
live
I'm
there.
debating something important when we're doing our deliberations. If we're doing
You
something
want your
stupid
12
or
angry
shitty.
men moment. Yeah, I wanna be I
I
mean,
do want my
of
12 Angry
course I
Men
would love to
moment.
live
I
there.
want to be the guy who convinces them all not guilty.
I wanna be see, I wouldn't wanna do that. That would be just
Too
I don't know
much?
because if you're not there, if you don't actually know, I would never wanna be, like, the person that deems someone, like, guilty or the vice versa of a guilty man going free. But I love to debate and I love to argue. So it'd be fun
Dude,
for
we
a
should
case
be
to
on the
kind of
same
ask me to
jury. We should
speak.
request.
That would be amazing. Do you think
Can I
do you
go
think
with
that's
him over there,
possible?
please?
If they're
Can him and
like
I wear a package? The two of us go together?
juror 15, do you know juror 12?
No, sir.
And if we were to be like,
Jury
"Oh yeah, we do know each
15,
other."
Jury 15, what is the box office show?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about, Your Honor. I'm afraid I've never heard that before. What is this episode you have on the People versus OJ Simpson where you and juror number 12 say you want to be on the same jury?
You both say you devise a plan where you can convince everyone else to go the other way,
I would
to
like
sway
to
them to
plead
the other
Fifth Amendment
side.
rights, Your Honor.
I plead the fifth. You
Dude, that's a
can't
great moment
you're not on
when Mark
trial. You can't
Furman comes and he's on the stand again, and everybody in the world hates him, and he's pleading his Fifth Amendment rights. And then they ask him, "What is the question they ask him?" The last question Johnny Cochran asks him: "Did you
will
plant evidence? Evidence? Did you
yes.
plant evidence at the Rockingham site or the Bundy site in this case?" And he says, "I would like to plead the fifth." Dude, that is damning without saying anything.
That's what's funny too about the whole plead the fifth thing. Because in truth, it's supposed to be like, oh, you
I
don't
will
have
not
to.
give you an answer. Yeah, I will not give you
But
a
it's
concrete
always like,
answer.
you're saying that
You could
because
have said
you
no.
think there is
Why didn't you
something
say
that would
no?
get you guilty. Yeah.
Hmm.
So we'll talk about that because the Furman stuff is crazy, and that's the thing too. How do you become the most hated man in a trial about somebody that butchered two people and one of the most
Yeah.
heinous double murders out there? Like, that is impressive to do. But literally during that stuff, like watching it, knowing it's real, I'm like, I just every fiber of me
Oh my
despises
god,
this
dude. He
guy.
says the most atrocious shit I've ever heard in my
And it's
life.
even worse because on top of all of that, of being a disgusting human being, all the stuff he like admitted to in those tapes, he's the reason that OJ got off. So
Yeah.
now, for 20 years or whatever it is, aside from that other stint in jail he had for a separate crime, this man was walking free because
Hmm.
Furman happened to be one of the detectives at the scene, and he had all this baggage behind him. Like, dude, you suck.
Yeah.
God,
As if racist wasn't enough. You just had to be even worse on top
racist,
of that.
misogynist, like anti-Semitic, a Nazi, and then on top of all that, gets OJ off. Like, dude,
Yeah.
can there be a more awful person out
That's a
here?
great end to that one episode, though, where Darden is spending the whole time saying, please do not put Mark Furman on the stand. Please do not do it. He is, like, by all means, yes, he seems like he's good and he seems like he's doing these interviews right, but there's a certain way he's talking, and I can tell they're going to use it
Yeah,
against
from the
them.
get-go,
Please
he
don't do
was
it. And
like,
Marsh is like,
"Don't do
no, we're
this."
going to do it. He knows his stuff inside and out. He's better than the other two cops on the stand. He's going to be fine. And then the very end of the episode is him polished. Like they do a brief where they do the interview, and he says, yes, I collect World War II memorabilia, and they carry it on. And then there's a brief bit where he's washing the cabinet at the very end, and it's just Nazi medals and you're like,
Yeah,
dude, they are fucked. And it doesn't come back until the second to last episode when they bring out the
I
Mark
know.
Furman tapes. You're like,
It's
when
great.
is this going to bite them in the ass? Because he goes to court in the next episode and they do his testimony and he does fine. Like he does pretty good the first time he's
Yeah.
on the stand. Nathan Lane comes at him and he throws everything he got and he rejects it all. He does really good. He presents the evidence cleanly. He doesn't seem like he made any blunders like the other two cops and he
Mhm.
does fine. And then it sits there for the rest of the series where you're like, this guy, he's obviously horrible. He has these Nazi medals. He obviously is a bad person, worse than the other two cops by far. But he did good on the stand. When is this going to bite them in the ass? And then the Mark Furman tapes come, and you're like, oh my fucking God. Not only did he lie on the stand, he has said the worst things in the world. And then says shit about Lance Ito's wife.
That's
What
so
the
crazy, dude.
fuck is that?
Watching this the first time, I'm like, "That can't be true. Like, that's impossible." The wife of the judge.
And then they had to bring in a second judge to determine if Lance Ito was able to continue as the judge in the first case.
Insanity, dude. Like, that plot twist was crazy of they might have to go to mistrial because Lance's wife was mentioned in those tapes. That's just insane. Again, like, how can every single person, the defense hates you, the prosecution hates you, the judge hates you, everyone hates you? Like, that's amazing. I just cannot believe that. Yeah, so that plot twist was insane. And rewatching it, of course, knowing Furman, like anytime his name is mentioned, there's like they hold on the person's face or they have like some sound effect in there.
Yeah, they're setting it up really, really well. We're like, if you don't know the story, you're like, this Mark Furman guy doesn't
Yeah,
seem
you're
very
like,
good.
what's going on with this Furman guy? And
Why
then they
is
had
Mark
that
Furman so much
in
attention towards him?
episode 3 or whatever it was when Lance gets put on the case and
Uh
then
huh.
the wife has to sign a thing and then she goes down the list and sees Mark Furman and is like, ooh, but then signs it anyway and you're like, oh, so something happened with
What
Furman.
does she
Totally
reprimand
forget
him
that until
for?
this point.
What does she reprimand him
For
for?
I don't know, but probably for being a
Literally
jerk
something
or
racist, I
racist
think. Yeah.
or police brutality or something like that.
Just the fact that there's a recorded tape of him saying, yeah, I will convict any black man I can, regardless of whether or not I have to plant evidence. That's so damning. It's
That
like, you're
he
fucked.
volunteered all that too to like some just on tape. He was like willing to put his voice to that and say all these horrible things. Insane. But yeah, literally that moment. And that too was fascinating because a part of me was like, this guy is such a schmuck and terrible and awful. And this stuff does need to get aired out. Like the way Cochran was saying, like this matters. But then also being like, well, yeah, but I wanted the prosecution to win. And they're
Yeah.
like, this
It's a
is
tough
damning. And we
line. Yeah.
can't let all this stuff get in there. Because when you hear that, literally, that's your mind goes to, oh, so he's capable of doing this.
Yes.
He
And
would
he's
do this,
able and
OJ.
willing. And if
So,
that's even possible, if it's even slightly possible, and it seems like it could have happened, you can't convict OJ when
right.
he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison or possibly get the death penalty.
But that's why they would have had to, because again, I think only, I can't remember, they said 2 lines. I don't know if that ultimately is what was admitted into evidence, but, like, the
Yeah.
2 lines from the 13 hours,
It
where
was
if later
specifically the
they changed
perjury
it,
thing where they're quoting 2 lines where he says the N word to prove that he did commit perjury
that
when he
he
was on the
did,
stand the
yeah,
first
commit
time,
perjury.
which sucks for the defense, but ultimately, I mean, with this being such a famous case, the sequestering is obviously not going to be
Yeah, not
as
gonna
strong.
check
It's gonna
out.
get through. Someone's gonna be
But
like, "Yeah, by the way, Mark Furman said these terrible, crazy fucking things."
yeah, which is, so crazy. But then, yeah, when you get him on the stand again and you have him already starting to plead the 5th,
Mhm.
this was the thing too that they said of like, "Hey, are you going to say you plead the 5th? Are you gonna invoke your 5th Amendment right every time I ask a question?" And he's like, "Yes." And then they're like, "Okay, give us 1 moment, Your Honor." They go back, they do a little huddle, and then they come back and they're like, "Okay, did you plant any evidence in the OJ case?" What's even better about that beforehand is when he first comes in, Darden gets up and leaves. Like, he
Yeah.
doesn't even stay for this ticking time bomb that he knows about to happen. Um, and then Cochran comes up, drops that bomb of, "What are you gonna answer to this?" And, "Oh, I plead the 5th." And everyone's just like, "Dude," because it feels like it's admitting
Yeah.
that you did plant something in this if you won't answer,
Yeah.
"No, you didn't."
It's just
So
fucked. It's so fucked.
that's just terrible. But that's why they needed to show that Furman was not as key of a like investigator or detective in there. Because again, he wasn't one of the first people on site. So
But
they
he's the guy who
needed to just show
found the
like the
glove.
opportunity for he did find that glove at the but again, like he found the other glove. So he didn't find the one glove that was there. Other people would have found that second glove if it were on that site.
Mhm.
So they should have like really hammered that home, which they did in the closing arguments of like this man is racist. That's a real thing too, of where he's like, should he be on the LAPD? No. Is he an awful racist? Yes. Does everyone hate him? Yes. Should he be a police officer? No. Like all that's real.
Yeah, I hate
You
that. I hate
needed,
the argument of I'm gonna ask myself real easy questions.
oh yeah.
You know, I hate that.
But you
Any
have
kind
to
of
at that point
argument.
to be like, guys, we know he sucks,
You could
but
just say it. You don't have to ask.
when
I
minor
specifically hate the form of asking yourself the question to answer it.
when you do it like 7 times, that's a little much. At that point, just be like, yes, he is a racist scumbag. He's the worst LAPD has to offer, but
I think if
he
you say
could
it
not
definitively,
and did not
it's much
frame
stronger.
OJ in this case because XYZ, blah, blah, blah. He didn't have the opportunity. There was enough time.
Yeah, because you
Blah, blah,
can't
blah.
argue that he wouldn't, but you can argue that he couldn't.
Exactly. So you can say, like, yeah, he would have probably liked to, but he could not have because blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
So they need to emphasize that more. But that was the danger, which was an interesting element watching it through this time because Marsha excluded a lot of potential witnesses because she was so upset that they would sell out and like go talk to the media at first or do a book deal, stuff like that. So her pool of witnesses continually whittled down to
Yeah,
be Furman. And that's why it was also so much worse when your star witness is the worst
the
human being
fucking
alive.
Antichrist.
Yeah. So that was a tough break ultimately. But that too, I like how they had because Darden's big blunder is the gloves, and then Marsha's big blunder is believing Furman should go on the stand. So
Yeah,
I like that they
they
each
both
had
fucked up.
their massive,
And it's the two
miscalculation
biggest thing that helped OJ's case was them fucking up those things. Because
for
other
sure.
than that, it's just the defense coming up with, you know, random shit to throw at the wall, see what sticks. Those two things are their biggest actual claims that they can make, saying those gloves didn't fit, and even if they did, they were found by a racist cop who was willing to plant evidence.
Hmm. Very true. So yeah, we get to the final episode, the verdict. They do their closing statements. It is a great moment when we see Johnny Cochran trying to discover the "if it doesn't fit, you must acquit" line,
It's
which
so
certainly
it's
has
so cheesy.
transcended.
It's such a cheesy like what's it called, Oscar Beatty moment where he's sitting there. He's like, if the gloves, what is it? What is it? He says something different at first. He goes,
Yeah,
no,
he
no,
keeps
no,
trying
scratches it out.
other
Then he goes,
ulteriors.
if
Yeah.
the gloves don't fit, and then it like cuts to the trial, and you're like, come on, dude, it's such an Oscar Beatty thing.
Yeah,
It's a little cheesy.
it kind of is, but hey, it works ultimately.
I love the film, the way they filmed a lot of the trial scenes where they are cutting back and forth between real shooting of the actors to like the trial cams on the actors. as you would have seen them on television as you're watching it because it was such a highly televised thing. I think that's really cool.
Hmm. Agree. And they do that, yeah, a lot. They did it for the
Mm-hmm.
gloves a lot, and then this one as well. They definitely emphasized it, and they also included some of the real footage. So I think since the Rodney King thing, they hadn't dipped into real life footage. Maybe one for the Bronco chase or something,
Mm-hmm.
but they only dip back into real life footage and splice that in for the verdict reactions and the anticipation of everyone like
Mm-hmm.
getting ready for this massive conclusion to the trial of the century.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we have the rapid jury deliberation
Bro, and
with
Johnny Cochran shows up with his bodyguards, and they're like the people of Louis Farrakhan.
yep.
It's
And
so funny.
Shapiro is like,
And
"What are
Robert
you
Shapiro's
doing?
like,
I
"What
can't
the
get
hell
in."
are you doing? They can't be here. They don't even think I have a claim to Israel."
Yeah, that was funny. Again, just another one of those moments of Shapiro just being like on the outside doing his own thing while the rest of the people are like, "Oh, calm down. Like, let's just get in the car." And he's like, he doesn't get in the car. He just goes on his own. So yeah, that was funny. But the moment before that, where we see the whole deliberation, and of course it's divided in there. They do the whole guilty versus non-guilty, and when it's guilty, they all like crane their heads to the white person at the end of the table, um, and then they end up. Well, yeah, they all were like, "I will never ever be convinced," and so that one, the older lady that the defense was so scared about, they're like, "Oh, she's a witch. She can turn like 11 or just a whole non-guilty people to guilty."
She's the inverse of the 12 Angry Men.
Yeah,
One,
so
one angry woman.
exactly. So uh they're all like, "No, we will never change our minds." And so we just see a look on her, and then we cut to Darden getting the call that they've made the decision. I think the Shapiro Bob Shapiro, when he says the line of like, "My God, they spent less time talking about this case than anyone in America." That one stuck with me so long ever since that first show. Because imagine that, like these people spent a year in this trial.
Mhm. And then they went to a
So
room and
they're
talked about it for 4 hours. And then they're like,
performing
if it's a guilty verdict, it takes them an hour to do the paperwork. It means they did it for 3 hours.
right, that's so funny. Because literally, yeah, they're supposed to not talk about it. Again, who
Mhm.
knows how much that's able to be enforced when they're in sequestering, but they're not supposed to talk about it. So imagine these people that are only thinking inside their own head about this case for a year. They finally get to talk about it. We would have been doing what we were doing here of like, that was crazy. Like, bro, his wife was in the tapes. I guess they didn't know that part. But Furman, bro, he's a insane racist. Like all of that, we would just be unpacking what happened in the case for at least the first week, and then we'd be like, okay, let's get down to business. Did he do it or not? These
We
people would
spent
talk
a
for
week just shit
hours.
talking.
Yeah, pretty
Bro,
much.
did you see
Speaking
Marsha's
of Marcia's
hair?
hair,
Oh, fucking God, dude. That
it's
shit was
trash. Oh my god, what was she thinking?
crazy.
When she did the blow, I would just got the straight hair. Okay.
Yo, turned her into Rick James. That's just insane.
Do you think Marcia and Darden are sleeping together? I think there
Dude,
was
their
something there, right?
chemistry is unreal.
What about F. Lee Bailey and Bob Shapiro? They got to have something going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's tension there for sure.
I mean, who wouldn't be attracted to those eyebrows?
Bro, F. Lee Bailey fucks for sure.
So, yeah, that is insane. That after all that, they took one day, a few hours, just to
Literally just a
decide
couple
the most
hours.
important, like, well, the
The
most
trial of the
looked
century.
at trial of all time for sure, trial of the century. Um, so that was insane. Everyone getting back to the courthouse, and then they are very faithful to the actual events as it happened when they do the verdict reading, even down to the Orenthal James Simpson, like that mispronunciation there. And then we get the reactions. And this is the thing that kills me every time. I love looking at videos of this, of everyone waiting with bated breath. And then you see all the white people just look so crestfallen, and all the
Mhm.
black people celebrating when that
It's
verdict comes
crazy
back.
how stark the divide
The
is.
divide is insane because you see videos again, it's like mixed up with all these different people, and the reaction almost every single time, like 99% of the time, you can bet a black person's going to get out of their chair and be happy, and then a black person's going to like, or the white person is just going to look down and be like distraught or shocked. Like the differences in reaction and the passion on both sides too of it, each side being like convinced that they're like, yes, this is the right way or this is the wrong way. Just insane, insane to look back on and see.
But I just feel nowadays it is so 100% universally understood that OJ Simpson absolutely did it. When do you think that became a thing where people were
I
like,
don't know, but
where people
because
would just acknowledge, like, yeah, yeah, he did it. Yeah.
I don't know if it's too, because obviously, like, people our age are going to be different than the people that live through it. But again, anyone that I've talked to about it, all the black people I've talked to about it, they're like, yeah, he was guilty for
Yeah.
sure. So again, they're our age, so they grew up with the same sort of like offhanded like acknowledgement that of course he did it. I think that too in like pop culture has like changed things, but I want to ask like the people that would have seen it. I want to sit down people, which I don't know honestly. Like after OJ's death, you would have thought people would have done this, but get people together again and be like, okay, looking back on it, what did you think during the time, and then what do you think now?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of it was back then the whole thing of post Rodney King, all that
Yeah.
stuff.
It's
I think
tied
she
to a
did a
lot
great
of
job
emotion, a lot of strong
spotlighting it.
emotions at
Yeah,
the time.
it's a lot
And
of
now that
emotion.
you've
It's
had 20 years of distance, 30 years of distance, you can take a look back and make an actual decision as to what you think of what happened.
exactly. And again, the DNA thing too, because again, back then it was a newer form of evidence, but now it's so like obvious and well understood that I feel like that too has made people be like, oh, he was what, one in like 12 billion or something like that, and
Yeah.
there was
Nowadays,
5
you
billion
if you were a
people
prosecutor, you
in
could
it,
just go to a
and
jury and say, "We found some of his DNA at the crime scene," and then that's damning evidence.
Ron
Cut and dry.
Goldman's blood was in OJ's car. They have never met once.
Yeah,
How is that possible? You're done.
done.
Easy. Like, so it's crazy to see how big the divide was back then and how much it seems universal and unanimous that he did it now. Because again, in my own personal life, I haven't met a single person that does think he was innocent. So it's wild to see how it was back then versus now, and the emotions that were in the case, and how it shed a light on the racial divide at that time. But yeah, we get to see the other stuff post verdict. Marcia Darden resigning, them having that heart to heart. We learn about what happened to her in Italy and why she pushed so hard for this. And that was sad because it's part of real life, so they had to like do that. They both resigned, but it's just unfortunate that neither of them continued at least a little bit to try and, again, my mindset, I would be like, wow, I bungled the worst thing ever. I need to now make up for this and do better on every single prosecution I do from here on out. Um,
Mhm.
and they didn't do that. They had to just say that's it and bid farewell to law, basically, which is a shame. But that final heart to heart, I thought was a great scene. Again, Darden and Johnny's heart to heart was a great scene. This part too, Johnny Cochran. Again, I am so upset at him being able to get this guilty man off.
Mhm.
But then you see when he's looking at the thing of like, okay, a bunch of police departments are now going to open investigations and they're going to try and change certain rules here and there and change how the conduct is taking place. And he's saying like finally people like understand the struggle of black people with against police in this nation. He sheds a tear and you see that and it's like, okay, this person that has experienced a lot of that, who's dealt with all these cases of police brutality or people getting framed, stuff like that, for him it ultimately was worth it to do this, to get OJ off. Again, whether or
Mhm.
not he believed he was innocent, I don't know, but he felt like he was making a big change by making this trial not about what one man may have done to two people and made it about what a country had been doing to black people for centuries. So I thought again that was just a brilliant thing to include in there because ultimately, like, he is sort of the antagonist since we're rooting for the prosecution in this, but he had his reasons and they're not like all terrible. So I thought that was great. It was also, I mean, sad to see like again how far have we been from that? Like what, it's been 30 years now, and what, 25, 26 years after that case, everything with the Black Lives Matter movement in the
Mhm.
2020s during the pandemic, everything that went down with that, and all the same thing of like, okay, all these big changes are going to happen, and how much of that has come to pass, how much has really changed. Certainly progress from the Rodney King days from the 90s, but
Yeah.
still the same mission that Johnny's been dead for what 20 years now, I think.
Yeah.
And he would still be, if he were alive, he'd still be pushing like the same thing. Like if another OJ thing happened, he would probably still feel in his heart that he's like, okay, we need to shed a light on how the system is still not the way that it should be. Um, so yeah, just a fascinating element. And then OJ, we see Kardashian is no longer by his side. OJ can't get a table at the place he wants to eat at. So we do see there's a bit of a change.
He may have won the court, but he lost the court of public opinion, at least with the
He
people that
sure
mattered. And then
he
as the
sure
years
did.
went on, it certainly got worse and worse.
Oh yeah. It's probably too like that other crime that he committed.
That and the Goldman civil case.
That too. I
Yeah.
think all those probably helped people be like, okay, this far removed, we can see maybe OJ did have the capacity to do that, and yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't all
Maybe he's a piece of shit.
framed or anything. Maybe he's a schmuck.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, even though it was a grisly murder, he had no controversies that were super public at the time. So he was just like this golden boy figure who was this great football. Like imagine if Tom Brady was on trial for double homicide, like grisly double homicide.
Yeah,
How many Patriots fans do you think would be on his side?
it would be insane. That's a good. Well, yeah, because I think even Tom Brady. Again, we didn't live through it, so I don't know how like famous OJ is. But I mean, Tom Brady, of
He was
course, is
pretty,
considered
dude. He
the
was
goat
like one of the
of.
first athletes to be like a movie star,
Yeah, so
along with
he
like
had a
Andre the
huge.
Giant and shit. He was one of the first athletes to become a big movie star, and then he had all those Hertz commercials and all kinds of other commercials. He had workout
That's
tapes.
funny too, because Tom Brady, I think, is doing Hertz
He is,
commercials.
yeah, which
So I'm
is
like,
really
oh,
good.
Brady,
Carrying on the OJ
don't follow
legacy.
everything OJ's done. He had a movie too of 80 for Brady or whatever it is.
He
So I'm like,
murders Gronk,
don't do it, Brady. Not Gronk.
not Gronk.
So, but yeah, that would be. I mean, you see it all the time too. With, I mean, to different levels, but like when artists, whenever they get quote unquote canceled, and then you find the people that are like, yeah, but I'll still rock with them. I'll
Dude,
put on
could
their
you
music.
imagine if The Rock was on
Don't
trial for
even
double homicide? He's
stop.
the biggest name to ever come from sports into the world of acting, into to like become a household name. He's become the biggest name in that regard.
Yeah,
That would be 10 times crazier than the OJ trial.
that'd be insane.
It would be ridiculous.
It would be. So that was the other thing I was going to bring up of like trial of the century. So OJ clearly was the trial of the century there, and still to this day is probably the biggest. But I
Mhm.
was like, what would be other major trials of the century? Have we had it so far? Or are we still waiting on the trial of the century? You and I mean, since we're these were national cases, but since we're in Florida, Central Florida, the George Zimmerman one and Casey Anthony, I think were so prominent.
Oh my god,
Like
dude. I
those
remember
were like the
when the
OJ ones
Trayvon
for
Martin
us.
thing happened. Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah, like living through that was crazy because again, those are like right
He was 30 minutes from where we
inside our
were
neighborhood,
living.
literally. Yeah, like in our own backyards with Central Florida. So those were national, but they were like very close to home. So I don't know if any could like pass those because local news, national news, it was everywhere,
Yeah.
everywhere for those things.
Mhm.
But beyond that, I was trying to think what would be the trial of the century so far.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, I think, has to be because it had that same the celebrity element.
Yeah, there's enough
Everyone's
there that you
talking
could
about it,
make it wouldn't be an
televised,
American crime story, I guess. It would probably be more like a feud. You know what I'm talking about? The feud show, Betty and Joan. They could do a feud, Amber Heard, Johnny Depp season.
right?
And that trial would be so funny to rewatch with actors playing them. Dude,
Yeah,
that just watching clips of that shit was insane. Some of the shit
because that
they said.
had the '90s obviously didn't have like social media, so that would be a new factor to this one of the constant chatter in person, but also all over social media, all the memes getting made.
Mhm.
Um, you would see because there were a lot of, I mean, revelations and twists and turns in that one. Again, it wasn't as high stakes as a
Yeah.
double murder thing. It did have an important like connection to a larger societal issue with domestic abuse, Me Too, Times Up, all of that stuff. This coming in the wake of that. Um, but yeah, it had that level of craziness, media circus stuff of like this is awful for like real pain. Definitely was happening here, but also it's entertaining to watch it all go down and just absurd. There's that level of absurdity to it where if you detach yourself enough, which in itself is awful, but detach yourself and it just plays out like an insane, entertaining weekly television show. I mean, that's like what it was. So I think that one so far has to be the one. If there were to be another, because it'd have to be a crazy level of fame. as you said, like a Tom Brady or Dwayne Johnson for it to outshine OJ. But then would it have the same level of twists and turns, the same connection? Again, the whole racial aspect to OJ made it so prominent.
Nothing will ever be so
Wondering
captivating.
what else could like yeah reach that caliber.
With so many
I didn't know
twists
that was
like
possible.
that, and so and like the not guilty verdict on top of it is. I was thinking Casey Anthony might be close, just because there were a lot of twists in that from what I remember. And then she was not guilty, right? They
Yeah, Zimmerman too. Like they all that's the one like string throughout all these
The craziest
them
ones are
being
the
not
ones where they get
guilty.
away. Yeah. If it's a
Yeah.
crazy trial and then they get convicted, it's kind of like, well, yeah, of course, look at all this evidence. But when they get away with it, when there's overwhelming evidence that they did it, it's bewildering.
Mhm.
Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, the
I
Casey
still don't
Anthony
know
one
how
definitely
jurors
does have insane stuff. Again, I just remember a month until she called the police, and it was at the behest of like her own mother too, and stuff like that. I remember because that too was the whole like searching for the body was the whole thing. Like it was a national case
I
before it
remember
became like the murder case. It was like the missing persons. So that's also why that one was probably huge. So yeah, I don't know.
they could do an
Again,
American Crime Story with Casey Anthony.
they
That
could.
would be compelling. I also think George Zimmerman would be compelling because that shit was just crazy. He literally just shot Trayvon Martin on the sidewalk, who did nothing to him, and got away with it.
He did, and that's the other thing too. Of it pops up every now and then, but like he got in other altercations. Like, do you remember there's like a road rage
Yeah,
incident
yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
him, and he like busted out a gun and was gonna shoot some other person. So like that's crazy to me. Um,
That was just the first
yeah,
time growing up, especially so close. It was the first time I've ever seen anything so bewildering to me. I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. This man shot this other man in the street. That's such a horrible thing. And then I was told that he got away with it. And I was like, what do you mean he got away with it? All
hmm
the evidence points to him shooting Trayvon Martin, who was unarmed, just walking on the sidewalk. What do you mean he got away? He was not a cop. He was nobody. He was just a guy shooting another guy.
neighborhood watch
Yeah,
person. Yeah.
what do you mean he got away with it? That doesn't make any sense to me. I need to do more
Well,
research into
it was
that.
the self defense thing because there was no.
Yeah,
I mean,
which was
obviously he killed him,
crazy.
but it was like, oh, was it self defense or was it not?
It's crazy to
And it's
claim that.
so obvious. I mean, looking at it, yeah, it was. He sought out. He made something out of nothing. Again, he was unarmed. It was like Skittles or something. He had
Yeah,
in his
his
bag. He
Skittles
came
and
back from the
Arizona
convenience
tea.
store. Yeah, and then Zimmerman tries to start something and ends up shooting him. And it's like, bro, how does he get off with that? And then later you see like these other altercations he has, other things that get him in trouble with the law. And it's like, wow, we could have prevented those things if he had just been punished properly for the awful, heinous
Yeah.
thing that he had already committed.
I remember for a long time, what were we like 11, 12 when that happened? We were young, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2012, right? You can look it up. I don't
Yeah, I
remember, but
remember hearing in the news that like Trayvon Martin was walking, he had a big black hoodie up over his head, and George Zimmerman couldn't see who it was when he was walking. And I remember my mom hearing that, and her telling me, if you're wearing a hoodie, do not put your hood up. Let them like see who you are, so they know you're not a threat. And I'm like,
mhm,
I should be able to put my hoodie up, but I didn't. I didn't for most of my life growing up until I was an adult. I did not put my hoodie up over my head because I wanted people to see that I was not like any kind of a threat, or that I was just like a guy. They could see
right.
my face clearly, which is a crazy thing to think. I should be able to put my hoodie up and it's fine. And it is fine.
hmm Yeah, it's crazy, and that obviously ignited the whole Black Lives Matter stuff,
As it
which
should.
became much more prominent again. I think like 2015,
Ridiculous.
16 when People versus OJ was coming out, but it's seeing those connections between like OJ and then Trayvon thing and all this is it's fascinating to see, disheartening to see again of like the actual nature of their connections, how little things have changed, but yeah, definitely those two because they were so close to home, I think are definitely going to be up there. And then I think the nationwide, like again, the media circus level stuff, I think Johnny Depp and Amber Heard take the crown for that one at least. But yeah, OJ, People versus OJ Simpson, got to be one of the craziest like pop culture things to ever take place. And the show did it justice. I think it did it brilliantly. Amazing performances, amazing writing. The cinematography was awesome. Yeah, this is like the best way I think to go back and experience the dramatized version of events here. And it makes you want to go back and as you said and I said throughout the show, we would like look up the stuff to see if this was real. You could try to get
Mm.
to see more information about it, and I think that's the best thing that a like fictional retelling can do. So, any other last words on People versus OJ?
No, it's just a crazy, crazy thing. What a crazy thing to have happen.
Hmm. And he, of course, is finally deceased. So that's the other thing too, like the whole Goldman family and like how they always feel like they're left out of it. They were
Mm.
included, of course, but frankly, like it's very minor compared to the rest of it. Um, it's good that again they got their civil suit won, but I think they never even really got all the payout that they were awarded from that,
I
which
think
is
a
another.
lot of the payout is coming now that he's dead. I think
Well,
I read
they
somewhere that
said,
the lawyer said he reversed his decision and will be giving out the money to the Goldman family.
"Oh, he will be giving." Okay, because
I think
his first thing was like,
yeah,
"My
he said
mission
he
is to make
wasn't
sure they
going
get
to.
nothing."
Yeah, and then I think he reversed that very quickly when people shit on him and was like, "Okay, yeah, never
Yeah,
mind. They will. I will make sure the Goldmans receive money from
when they're like,
OJ's."
"Wow, you suck." It's also what right would he have to like deny that? Like literally, they're owed this money,
If they're owed the money as results of a court, like no amount of a will can predetermine where that money is going to go if he owes the Goldmans that money. Because at the end of the show, it says that he owes them like 20-30 million dollars, and he only paid them like 500,000, something like that
right?
at the time. And
Yeah, that was
now that he's dead, any money that he has should just go straight to the Goldmans.
absolutely, yeah. Until that whatever they're owed is paid out, and then if there's any left over, okay, start filling out those obligations in the will. But until that point, I mean, he should have paid that stuff,
There's no
and
way
that
there's
was
shit left over. But like I know he's a wealthy man, but I mean how much money could he have been making over the last 30 years? It could not have been a lot. Like he had that book. The book probably sold well. I mean, there's a book called If I Did It. I think it probably
yeah.
sold pretty well. But other than that, he wasn't doing commercials. He was making not a lot of
I
appearances, I
mean, he
don't
was in
believe.
jail for so
He
much
was
of
in
it, so
jail for a
yeah.
good chunk of it, yeah.
But I'm sure again, I don't know how much his legal fees were during the trial of the century, but I mean, if he were a smart man, he would have had investments and all that stuff and real estate that should have been getting liquidated so that he could have
Robert
paid off
Shapiro
the.
telling F. Lee Bailey that he is doing it pro bono is so funny. You don't understand. You don't understand, Lee. This is pro bono. You're not getting paid.
And I love that Lee Bailey was so pissed off by that that's why he starts going to Cochran and Kardashian and all that to try and like get him downgraded.
Yeah.
Because like, why did Shapiro care? Like, OJ's loaded. He's gonna pay all you guys. Why were you like, oh yeah, you're coming on pro bono? What are you pro bono, Shapiro? Like,
I'm
that's
lead
absurd.
attorney. I love all the times John Travolta goes, "Yes, but I'm the lead attorney, so I will be doing this." It's like
Hmm.
it's obvious you should not be the one making these claims.
Yeah,
Yes, but I'm the
definitely
lead
not.
attorney.
Again, he had some good ideas. Again, the whole race card thing was his,
Oh,
but
dude,
yeah,
when
definitely
Robert
out of his
Shapiro
element.
does his press conference about the race card and it doesn't go well, and Johnny Cochran's mad that he didn't get to do it, so he goes over to the shoe shine guy and sits down,
Yeah,
and all the
yeah,
reporters start pulling up, and he pretty much just gives his own press conference. Fantastic.
yeah. Dude, truly, Courtney B. Vance, great, great
Oh my
performance here.
god, dude, yes.
Why has he not been in more like
I
prominent stuff?
don't know what
He needs to
happened.
be out there doing stuff. He's so amazing.
He is amazing. What has he been doing since this? Do you
I had
know?
looked it up. I forget what it was, but it wasn't anything like truly notable. I was like, "You are phenomenal. Why is it taken this long? Like it's been 8 years. You need to be doing something to get." I mean, he won an Emmy. Sarah Paulson won an Emmy. Sterling K. Brown
Hmm.
won an Emmy, and he won an Emmy. All well deserved. Obviously, one for the limited series as well. I think one for writing for one of the episodes too. So it was a very well received, well awarded show.
Yeah.
And you would have thought that would mean Courtney B. Vance and everyone else. Again, Sterling K. Brown definitely did go on to bigger things.
Yeah.
Sarah Paulson, of course, but
He was in The Mummy. He was the narrator in Isle of Dogs. He was in The Photograph with Lakeith Stanfield. He was in Project Power with Jamie Foxx. He was in Lovecraft Country, which was almost good. He was in Genius, which was uh, the life stories of history's greatest minds from their days. What is it? I guess it's a miniseries.
so
Oh,
long.
right. Genius. It's a miniseries. I forgot. Of course. I think he's in the MLK. What episode is he? What season is he in of that show? Because there's one on
MLK.
Einstein. He's in the Aretha Franklin season. Okay. So he did that. And then that was kind of just it. And that was 2021. And that was kind of it since then. I think he's just been taking a break.
He's been chilling, I guess. Yeah, he needs to come back though.
Dude,
He
he's
needs
gonna be in Lilo and Stitch, then the live action. He's Cobra Bubbles.
bruh. That's a
Good
great get.
cast. Good
And that'll
cast.
be the start of his grand
Thank God,
comeback.
dude. He's gonna be great
Lilo
in
and
that.
Stitch bringing him back. Lilo and Stitch.
Cobra Bubbles, good call. He's awesome.
But yeah. So anyway, phenomenal show, insane trial, crazy stuff. Can't
Shout out
be
Courtney B. Vance.
can't be said enough. But yeah, shout out to him, shout out to the whole cast, shout out to everyone. And once again, I mean the Brown family, the Goldman family, truly unfortunate that they weren't able to get justice in the way that they
Absolutely.
deserved. But I'm glad that again the civil suit they were able to get some justice. I'm glad that karma came into effect and OJ did spend a good portion of his last years in jail. A massive shame. I remember seeing that in the closing credits where it's like, oh, he's been in jail for this long, and he's going to be able to go on parole or eligible for potential parole starting like next year.
Mm. And he
Um,
was. He went on
and
parole.
then he was, and then he got on parole, and I'm like, man, that's such a shame. So, oh well, but ultimately, I think enough justice was given out, at least to make it tolerable. But there should have been more, and at least now everyone can agree he did it. Those gloves did fit.
Absolutely.
So we
He was
shouldn't have.
just he was just making him not fit. What an
Yeah.
asshole. Anyway, that's all the time we have. If you'd like to give your thoughts on the show, you can email us at theboxofficeshowpod@gmail.com.
Our main title theme for the show is Sundown by Joseph McDade.
If you like the show, please give us 5 stars whatever podcast app you're listening to, and be sure to tune in next week. Have a great rest of your day.